Hey everyone, and welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are diving into something that I'm sure you've all been thinking about a lot lately, energy independence at home.
Yeah, definitely a hot topic.
Yeah, and we've got a ton of research here to sift through. We've got articles from Forbes, EcoWatch, some practical guides from companies like Home Biogas and Alti.
Even some interesting perspectives from some European sources.
Yeah, so before we get ahead of ourselves talking about solar panels and batteries and things like that, let's just start with the basics. Like, what exactly does energy independence even mean?
Well, at its core, energy independence is really about having the ability to generate and control your own power, reducing your reliance on traditional power grids.
So it's less about completely disconnecting from the grid and more about just having control over where your energy comes from.
Exactly. There are varying levels of energy independence, and it's about finding what works for you and your goals.
Okay, I see. That makes sense. Now I'm seeing a lot of people talking about the benefits of energy independence, and it doesn't seem like it's just about saving money on electricity bills.
Right. The financial aspect is appealing for sure, but there's so much more to it than that. Things like increased home value, lower carbon footprint, and even potential benefits when it comes to insurance.
It seems like it's a lot about resilience and peace of mind as well, knowing that you're not just totally dependent on these external forces for all your energy needs.
For sure. It's also about taking ownership of your impact on the planet and creating a more stable and secure future for yourself.
Yeah, that's a big one these days.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get into how to actually achieve energy independence. The most obvious place to start seems to be renewable energy sources.
Absolutely. And when most people think about renewable energy for their homes, solar panels are usually the first thing that come to mind.
Yeah, for sure. They're like the poster child for this whole thing. But one of the sources mentioned another option, wind turbines? What's the deal with those?
Well, wind turbines harness the power of wind to generate electricity, but their effectiveness really comes down to location. You need a consistently windy area to make them worthwhile.
Gotcha. So for most people, solar panels are probably going to be the more practical option.
In many cases, yes.
Mm-hmm.
Especially if you consider things like ease of installation and space requirements.
Okay, let's stick with solar for a bit then. One thing that caught my eye was the difference between monocrystalline and polycrystalline solar panels. What's the difference and why should I care?
Good question. It comes down to how the silicon crystals are arranged within the panel. Monocrystalline panels, they use a single continuous crystal structure, which makes them more efficient at converting sunlight into electricity.
So if efficiency is my top priority, monocrystalline is the way to go.
Yeah, they tend to be more expensive, though. Polycrystalline panels, on the other hand, use multiple silicon fragments, so they're a little less efficient, but also more budget-friendly.
It's like choosing between a sports car and a reliable sedan. Both get you where you need to go, but with different levels of performance and cost.
I like that analogy. And it highlights a key point. There's no one-size-fits-all when it comes to solar panels. You really have to weigh your priorities: efficiency, budget, even aesthetics.
Right, because those sleek, black, monocrystalline panels might look fantastic on a modern roof, while the more affordable polycrystalline panels might be a better fit for a different aesthetic. So let's say we've done our research, we've crunched the numbers, and we're ready to invest in solar panels. What's the next step?
Well, you have to remember that the sun doesn't shine 2 never 47, so we need a way to store the energy for when we need it. Which brings us to batteries.
Ah, batteries, the unsung heroes of energy independence. They capture that excess solar power during the day and then release it when the sun goes down or if there's a cloudy day.
Exactly. They're really essential for achieving true energy independence, giving you that reliable power source even when the sun isn't cooperating.
Okay, I'm ready to get into batteries. From what I've seen, lithium-ion batteries seem to be the most popular choice right now. Is that right?
They are the current frontrunners, yes. They offer a great balance of performance, lifespan, and cost-effectiveness. But even within lithium-ion batteries, there are still some important distinctions.
Okay, I need some expert guidance here. Break it down for me. What are the different types of lithium-ion batteries, and what are the key things I should know about each one?
Well, let's start with two of the most common types: lithium iron phosphate, often shortened to LiFePO4, and lithium nickel manganese cobalt, or NMC. LiFePO4 batteries are known for their long lifespan and inherent safety. They can handle thousands of charge cycles and are less prone to overheating or catching fire, which makes them a popular choice for home systems.
So they're like the workhorses of the battery world, built to last and keep things running smoothly. What about NMC batteries? What are their strengths?
NMC batteries pack a lot of energy into a smaller package, giving them a higher energy density. This makes them a popular choice for applications where space is limited, like electric vehicles.
So if you need to maximize storage capacity in a limited space, NMC batteries might be the way to go.
Exactly. But it's important to remember the trade-offs. NMC batteries typically have a shorter lifespan than LiFePO batteries and can be more sensitive to temperature fluctuations.
It's fascinating how even within lithium-ion batteries, there's no one-size-fits-all solution.
Absolutely. Choosing the right battery for your energy independence setup is all about understanding your specific needs, your priorities, and your budget.
It's like putting together a puzzle, figuring out which pieces fit together best to create a complete and efficient energy system.
That's a great way to put it. Now, there's one more type of battery we should talk about: AGM batteries. It stands for absorbent glass mat. They're a type of sealed lead-acid battery.
Wait, lead-acid batteries? I thought these were like old technology.
They've been around for a while, and while they're not as advanced as lithium-ion batteries, they still have a role to play in certain situations.
So what are the pros and cons of AGM batteries compared to lithium-ion?
AGM batteries are generally more affordable than lithium-ion, but they have a shorter lifespan and lower energy density, which means you need more batteries to store the same amount of energy.
So they might be a decent option for someone on a tight budget or for systems with lower energy demands, but lithium-ion batteries are still the top dogs for performance and longevity.
Exactly. Again, it all boils down to weighing the trade-offs and finding the right balance for your individual needs and priorities. Now let's move on to another key component in your energy independence system, the inverter.
Okay, the inverter. This is the thing that takes that DC electricity generated by our solar panels and batteries and converts it into AC electricity that powers most of our household appliances, right?
Yep. It's like the translator between the language of solar panels and the language of our homes. Choosing the right inverter can be a bit tricky, though, with all the technical terms out there. You might come across terms like modified sine wave and pure sine wave.
Yeah, those terms definitely came up in our research. What do those mean and why should I care?
It all comes down to the shape of the electrical wave being produced. Modified sine wave inverters are generally more affordable and work well for powering simpler appliances like lights, fans, basic electronics. But for more sensitive electronics like computers, medical equipment, or anything with delicate motors, you'll want a pure sine wave inverter.
So modified sine wave for basic needs, pure sine wave for the fancy gadgets that need a cleaner flow of electricity. Got it. Now there's another component that keeps popping up. The charge controller. What does that do and why is it so important?
The charge controller acts as a kind of bodyguard for your batteries. It regulates the flow of electricity between your solar panels and your batteries, making sure they don't get overcharged, which can shorten their lifespan or even damage them.
So it's like a safety valve preventing any electrical mishaps with our batteries?
Precisely. And just like with inverters, there are different types of charge controllers, each with their own pros and cons. Two common types you'll see are PWM, which stands for pulse width modulation, and MPPT, which stands for maximum power point tracking.
Okay, more acronyms to keep track of. Can you break those down for me and explain what makes them different?
Sure. PWM controllers are simpler and more affordable. MPPT controllers are more sophisticated and efficient, especially in like less than ideal weather conditions. They're constantly adjusting to extract the maximum power from your panels.
Wow, so MPPT controllers sound like the way to go if you want to get the most out of your solar panels, but I'm guessing they come with a higher price tag, right?
They do tend to be more expensive, so it's a trade-off between cost and efficiency. For some people, the extra cost of an MPPT controller is worth the extra energy, especially if they don't get consistent sunshine.
Okay, so we've got our solar panels, our batteries, our inverter, our charge controller. It's starting to feel like we're building our own little power plant.
We're getting there. But before we move on, there's one more important aspect to consider: the wiring and circuitry that connects all of these components. This is not something to mess around with.
You're right. This is where we definitely need to be careful and maybe even call in an expert.
Definitely. Safety is absolutely paramount when you're dealing with electricity. Using the wrong gauge wire, making a loose connection, or not grounding your system properly could create a ton of problems, from reduced performance to even fire hazards. It's best to consult with a qualified electrician to make sure everything is installed correctly and safely.
Okay, safety first. But even if we're not doing the electrical work ourselves, it's still helpful to understand the basics, right?
Definitely. One thing we saw emphasized was understanding series and parallel wiring for solar panels. These concepts affect how the panels are connected, and how much voltage and current your system produces.
So it's not just about plugging things in, it's about understanding how those connections affect the flow of energy throughout the system.
Exactly. It's like designing a road system for electricity, making sure there are no bottlenecks or traffic jams.
Okay, I'm starting to feel a little overwhelmed with all this technical info, but I'm also really excited about the possibilities of having an energy-independent home. Is there anything else we should cover before we wrap up this first part?
One important step before you start designing your system is to figure out your energy needs. Do you know how much energy you're using on a daily basis?
That's a good point. I haven't really thought about it in those terms. Do I need to become obsessed with my electricity meter?
Not necessarily. There are easier ways to figure it out. Try making a list of all the electrical devices you use regularly and estimate how many hours a day you use them.
Okay, that seems doable. So once we have a better understanding of our energy usage, we can start figuring out what size solar system we need and what type of batteries would work best for our lifestyle, right?
Exactly. That's where we'll pick up in part 2, exploring the practical considerations of actually designing and installing a solar energy system for your home.
Awesome. I'm already looking forward to learning more about off-grid living and all the possibilities.
It's going to be an interesting conversation. We'll look at the installation process, the financial aspects of going solar, and even explore some of the latest advancements in renewable energy technology.
Can't wait. Stay tuned, everyone. We'll be back soon with part 2 of our deep dive into energy independence.
Welcome back to the deep dive. Last time, we laid the foundation for this whole energy independence journey, talking about the appeal of renewable energy, the pros and cons of different solar panels and batteries, and we even got into the weeds a bit with things like inverters and charge controllers.
Yeah, we covered a lot of ground.
We did, but I think we're just getting started.
For sure. I'm ready to go deeper. Now that we have a better grasp of the individual parts, I'm excited to actually figure out how to put it all together.
I think that's a great next step. Understanding those individual components is crucial. But knowing how they all interact within a system is really where the magic happens.
Okay, I like that analogy. So let's talk about putting it all together, designing and installing an actual solar energy system for your home. Where do we even begin?
Well, the first step is figuring out the best spot for your solar panels. Things like roof orientation, the angle of the roof, and even shade all play a huge role in making sure you're capturing as much energy as possible.
So it's not just about sticking a few panels on the roof and calling it a day.
Not quite. You want to be strategic about it. Ideally, your panels should face south to maximize sunlight exposure throughout the day. Even a small deviation from south can impact how much energy they produce.
Gotcha. It seems like there's a lot more thought and planning involved than I initially realized.
There is. So once you've got the ideal spot for your panels figured out, then comes the installation.
Okay, installation. That's where things start to feel a little more intimidating.
It can be. Depending on how comfortable you are with electrical work and how complex your system is, you might consider doing it yourself or hiring a professional installer.
I think for most people, especially those of us who aren't electricians, it's probably best to call in the pros, right?
You're probably right. It's definitely the safer and more reliable option for most people. While there's certainly information out there for DIY solar installations, working with a qualified and experienced installer ensures that everything is done correctly, safely, and up to code. Plus, they can handle all those permits and inspections, which can be a real headache to deal with on your own.
Okay, so we've got our panels installed, batteries are all charged up, the inverter is humming along, converting that DC power to AC power for our home. Are we officially off the grid now?
Not so fast. There's still the question of how you want to interact with the existing power grid, if at all.
Right. We touched on this before, the whole idea of being completely off-grid versus being connected to the grid through something called net metering. Can we talk about those options a bit more?
Definitely. Going completely off-grid means you're cutting ties with your utility company and relying solely on your own solar and battery system for all of your electricity. It's definitely the ultimate level of energy independence, but it also requires careful planning and a potentially larger system to handle those times when solar production is low, like at night or during bad weather.
It sounds really appealing in terms of self-sufficiency and not having to deal with utility bills, but also a bit daunting. How do you make sure you have enough power all the time?
It's definitely a lifestyle choice that requires a certain level of commitment and preparedness. On the other hand, net metering lets you stay connected to the grid while still taking advantage of solar energy.
Okay, yeah, remind me how net metering works.
Basically, when your solar panels are producing more electricity than you're using, that extra power gets sent back to the grid, and your utility company gives you credits for that energy. You can then use those credits to offset your electricity costs when your solar panels aren't producing enough, like at night or on cloudy days.
So it's like a two-way street for electricity. Your solar panels act as both a power source and a way to potentially earn some money back from the grid. I can see why that would be appealing to a lot of people who aren't ready to completely disconnect.
It's a great way to kind of test the waters with solar and see how it works for you while still having that safety net of the grid. Plus, it can drastically lower your energy bills,
Yeah.
even if you're not producing enough to fully cover all your usage.
So it's a win-win. Reducing reliance on fossil fuels, saving money on electricity, and maybe even earning some credits from your utility company sounds pretty good to me. But let's be realistic. Going solar, whether partially or fully, does come with a cost. How should people think about the financial side of this?
It's important to be realistic about the cost and explore the options for making it more affordable. There are definitely ways to do that.
Oh yeah, let's get into the numbers then. What kind of investment are we talking about for, say, a typical home solar system?
Well, it really varies depending on the size of your system, the specific panels and batteries you choose, where you live, how complex the installation is. There are a lot of factors.
I figured it wouldn't be a simple answer, but the good news is there are ways to potentially offset some of those costs, right? I've heard about things like tax credits and rebates.
Exactly. The federal government actually offers a pretty significant tax credit for homeowners who install solar energy systems.
Oh, wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah. And then a lot of states and even local utility companies have their own incentive programs like rebates, tax breaks, or even programs that pay you for the energy your system generates.
That's fantastic. So there's definitely some financial support out there to make going solar more appealing. It's worth doing some research to see what's available in your area.
Definitely. Now, one thing to keep in mind, while solar panels themselves don't require much upkeep, those batteries we talked about do have a limited lifespan. Eventually, they'll need to be replaced.
Okay, so it's important to factor in the potential cost of battery replacement down the road. But from what I've learned, lithium-ion batteries, especially the LiFePO4 kind, are pretty durable. So we're talking about a lifespan of several years, right?
Right, you won't be replacing them every year, but it's still something to think about when you're calculating the long-term return on your investment.
So it's all about weighing those upfront costs against the potential savings over time and the value of being more energy independent.
Exactly. And beyond the financial aspect, there's also the peace of mind that comes from knowing you're not completely reliant on the grid and more prepared for power outages, which are becoming increasingly common, unfortunately.
That's a huge plus. Especially with extreme weather events becoming more frequent, having a reliable backup power source is becoming more and more valuable. Speaking of potential challenges, though, what happens if you have a long stretch of cloudy weather or even a blizzard? Do our solar panels just stop working and we're left in the dark?
That's a valid concern, and it highlights why it's so important to have a backup plan. While those batteries can provide power for a while, they do have their limits. That's why a lot of people, particularly those going off-grid or living in areas with unpredictable weather, choose to have a backup generator.
Okay, that makes sense. It's like an insurance policy for your energy independence, providing that peace of mind, knowing that you have a way to keep the lights on no matter what.
Exactly. So we've talked about the practical aspects of solar systems, the financial considerations. But now I'm curious about the future. What kind of cool new technology is out there that could make energy independence even more accessible and efficient?
Yeah, let's talk about the future. What are you most excited about?
Well, one really promising area is the development of next-generation batteries. We already talked about how great lithium-ion batteries are, but imagine batteries that are even smaller, lighter, more powerful, and charge even faster than the ones we have now.
That sounds amazing. What's driving these advancements?
One area we read about is the development of solid-state batteries. Instead of using liquid electrolytes, these batteries use solid electrolytes, which makes them safer, more energy dense, and less likely to degrade over time.
Wow, that's pretty cool. Are there any other battery breakthroughs we should know about?
Another interesting one is flow batteries. They're especially well suited for larger scale energy storage applications because you can scale them up pretty easily just by increasing the size of the electrolyte tanks. Imagine a battery the size of a refrigerator that could power your whole house for days.
That's mind-blowing. It's incredible to think about how far battery technology has come and what's possible in the future. But what about the solar panels themselves? Any cool innovations happening there?
Definitely. We came across some research about the development of flexible solar panels. These panels are really interesting because they can be molded to fit curved surfaces, integrated into building materials, or even incorporated into clothing and wearable tech.
Flexible solar panels. Now that's straight out of the future. Imagine being able to charge your phone or laptop with solar panels built right into your jacket.
Yeah, right. And as the technology continues to improve and production costs decrease, we can expect to see these innovations integrated into our lives in ways we haven't even imagined yet.
It's really inspiring to see all this innovation happening in the field of renewable energy. But before we get too carried away with the future, I want to come back to something we touched on earlier: financing a solar system. Let's dive into that a bit deeper. Okay, so let's talk about the money stuff, because going solar, it can be a big investment. What are some ways people can actually finance these systems?
That's a great question. It is a big decision. But luckily, there are a bunch of options to make it more doable. One way is to get a loan specifically for solar, solar loan.
So it's like a mortgage, but for your solar panels.
Exactly. These loans usually have really good terms and can be customized to fit your budget and needs. Some lenders even offer loans with super low interest rates or flexible payment plans.
That makes it a little less scary. And I'm guessing there are companies that just focus on these kinds of loans, which would make it easier to find the right one.
Oh yeah, for sure. There's a whole industry for solar financing, so you don't have to navigate it all alone. And then there's another option you could think about: leasing a solar system.
Leasing. Okay, tell me more about that.
With a solar lease, you basically rent the system from a company instead of buying it outright.
Yeah.
This can really help with those upfront costs, making solar more accessible for more people.
So you just pay a monthly fee to use the system, kind of like how you pay for electricity now?
Yep, pretty much. It's getting more and more popular as a way to switch to solar without spending a ton of money up front. But just a heads up, it's always smart to read through the lease agreement carefully. Make sure it makes sense for you in the long run.
Good point. Always got to read the fine print. Now, I'm curious about this idea of community solar that we saw in some of the research. How does that work?
Community solar is awesome. It's a great way to get the benefits of solar even if you don't have a good roof or panels, or if you rent your home. Basically, you join a group of people who all chip in for a shared solar array. It's off-site, usually bigger than a rooftop system.
So like a solar co-op, everyone working together.
Exactly. You're pooling resources to create a bigger and more efficient source of solar energy. The electricity from the array goes into the grid, and everyone in the group gets credits on their electric bills based on their share of the project.
That's a cool concept. It really makes solar more accessible for everyone. Okay, so we've talked a lot about the nuts and bolts of going solar, but I want to zoom out for a second. What do you think this whole energy independence movement means for the world? Big picture.
It's a big deal, for sure. As more people become energy independent, it's not just about using less fossil fuels. It's also about making our energy systems more resilient and less centralized.
It's like a power shift, literally.
Yeah, it's putting the power back in the hands of the people. It gives them more control over their energy choices, and it sends a strong message to governments and big energy companies that we want a cleaner, more sustainable future.
It's pretty inspiring to think that all these individual choices can add up to something much bigger.
Yeah, definitely. So we've covered so much today, from how solar panels actually work to the financial side of things, and even what's coming next in renewable energy tech.
It's been a jam-packed deep dive. I feel like I've learned so much.
Me too. I hope our listeners are feeling inspired to explore what energy independence could look like for them.
For sure. The future of energy is in our hands, and the more we learn and embrace the possibilities, the better that future will be. So, to everyone listening, keep learning, keep asking questions, and don't be afraid to take action. The path to energy independence may seem challenging, but with the right information, resources, and a little bit of courage, it's totally achievable and so worth it. Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
We'll see you next time for another deep dive into a topic that matters.